Now, besides grouping elements and placing the elements, there's other design principles that we can apply in order to ensure that we're creating the visual hierarchy that we are looking for. Okay, so I highly suggest clicking on this link. It will bring you to this page, and it will honestly explain it better than I can. There's a audio, video component, and then they also have video transcript, which is really nice. That's very ADA. It'll discuss what the visual hierarchy is, with the ways of employing it, so on and so forth. Okay, but in broad strokes, just for your purposes, some things that you can do in order to try to make things more emphasized and things less so. One is style. So things you want to generally, in order to create cohesiveness within and harmony within your composition, everything should be treated in roughly the same style. You don't want to use a bunch of different font types for each one of these paragraphs. You want them all to be the same, so they all seem associated. They all have association. They all match together. It doesn't become a jumbled mess, right? Things like that. So spacing, all the different principles you can think of, you generally want to keep those somewhat similar. That being said, if you want something to stick out, so let's say I have this here, and let's say I have like this line, it's supposed to be a quote, right? If I chose a different typeface for this quote, and maybe it's a cursive font and it's green or something, that's going to stand out. So as far as the visual hierarchy is concerned, this actually might be more prominent than even any of these subtitles, which might be good, because then what that would do is that if someone's scanning the document, they would look and go, oh, what's this quote? They'd read the quote, and if it's like a really crazy quote, like they kicked my dog, then all of a sudden they're going to be much more interested in reading what you have there. Okay, so style is one way of doing that. Alignment. So alignment obviously means aligning your text as well as aligning your images. Alignment is kind of like proximity in that it creates association, right? So for example, if we look at this section here, right? So if there's association by proximity, I can tell that this goes to this, right? However, because these all have the same left alignment, you kind of get a looser association between each one of these separate elements as well. But it does also help the reader read your paragraphs if they are all aligned. So you just want to make sure that you're either using left alignment, you can use right alignment if it makes sense, but generally don't use center alignment. I use it now and then for little things, if it's like a one-off, but most of the time you usually want to try and create alignment that makes sense. White space is the negative space, so whatever content you have. So if you look at here, this would be positive space, this would be positive space, but all this area around it would be my negative space, or white space. Doesn't actually have to be physically white. Now, what I would say is that if you're really trying to emphasize, above all the other design elements that you could potentially employ, white space is the strongest. If I had a completely blank document and I just had the letter E right here, you'd be super drawn to the letter E, as opposed to if I have this entire document and I have this E over here being red, you'd definitely be drawn to it, and you would be drawn to it more than anything else, but not like if it had a bunch of space surrounding it. So white space is extremely crucial. You want to try and let your elements breathe. Color is really obvious. Brighter colors will draw attention, right? Lack of color will lose attention. Most of the time you want to try, again, for harmony and unity, you want to try and keep your color space, your colors down to maybe like 3 colors. If you try to go beyond that, it starts to become incohesive, and it doesn't. They don't feel associated anymore. But again, if you use an accent color, it will stand out. So a really common thing is people will have like an interior design. They'll have a neutral colored room, neutral carpet, right? And even the furniture will be neutrals, right? So maybe they're gray and browns and, just natural colors. But they might have like a bright red lamp. That's like a little accent, and it draws attention, and it kind of makes the room look more interesting as a whole. Or you might have a bright turquoise sofa, right? So there's things you can do that you do a little accent piece. But colors are a really great way of creating emphasis, but you do have to be careful with it as well. If you're trying to draw attention, again, with ADA stuff, Americans with Disability Act, you have to think about there are people that are colorblind. So you don't want to use that alone. You should be using it in tandem with other elements. Size, obviously, the larger the object, the more important it's going to seem, right? So headings are larger than body text, right? I don't need to really go much beyond that. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. Images draw more attention than any other element inside of your page. So you want to use as many of those as possible. You'll notice that when I have parts of my page that are just text, it's pretty darn boring. That's why I often make those stupid little cone sketches and I slap them on even if they don't make sense, because it just creates visual interest. Without them, it's really boring. Because they, usually your images will add color and interest and texture and all these other different things. So you really want to make sure you employ images. You should have as many images as you have text if possible. Mine's a very informative page, so it has a lot of text in it. It's kind of the nature of the beast. But even when I handle the text, I try to create some variety in it. Like even when I show code, it's displayed differently than other text. So here's an example of visual hierarchy. It's the same example as before, but these are meant to be placeholders for images. You'll read the image first, right? Then usually you'll read like the title second, and then you might read the smaller images. If they're smaller images, then maybe the subtitles, and the last thing you read is the body text. Okay, that's usually the final boss. So just be aware that that's more than likely how they're going to be reading your pages. There was actually this interesting at Adobe Max. If you ever get a chance, they usually have a virtual thing. It's like a convention that Adobe throws, and it's all about like their software, but also like graphic designs and trends and things. And there's a plugin that they have for Photoshop for people who create packaging design. They made it in-house. I can't remember who did it, but Adobe didn't make it. Somebody else did. And what you can do is you can take a package design, you put it in there, and then it will run through AI, and it will show you how much it will draw a person's eye. And then it will show you where they look first. It puts little numbers next to like where, if someone were to look at it, where they would look first, where they would look second, where they would look third. And they use it as a tool in order to, in order to employ a stronger visual hierarchy.